Okay, here what I'm going to look at is After Effects, and we're going to play around with the range selector. So playing around with some kinetic typography. So first I'm going to create a new composition in my project untitled, and I'm just going to play around with, just let's call this Kinetic Type. And I'm going to play around with a few things here with range selectors, and I'm just going to keep it normal, 1920, 1080, 24 frames per second, 15 seconds. We're just going to play around here a little bit. Background colors are going to be white to start. That's totally fine. And what I'm going to see here is zoom in a little bit, and I'm just going to start typing. I'm going to play with some type, but there's a reason why I'm going to play with a certain amount of type here. I'm going to click on the type tool, and as soon as I click on the type, it adds that layer automatically. Empty text layer, not a problem. I'm just going to type in hello my friend. Now I'm typing in a few extra letters here, a few words, just because I want to show you the difference. If we can go by character, we can go by word, we can do a few different things here. So what I like to do first, my type, the anchor point is not centered, so what I like to do is hold down the command key on my Mac, a PC, you could use the control key, just hold it down, double click on the pan behind tool or the anchor point tool, what this is called, and then it automatically centers it for you. And what I like to do is I also like to go to my align panel. If you don't see your align panel, just go to window and align, and it'll show up and you just center, and now it's perfectly centered. Now on your particular composition, it's good to put it wherever you actually want it to be, wherever it's supposed to go. Here I'm just playing around to show it to you here. So once again, center, there it is. There's my type, and now what I could do, I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to twirl this down. As I twirl this down, what I could do, I have my normal transform. I could change my anchor point position, scale, rotation, opacity. I could animate them all if I want to, but I'm not going to do that. This time I'm going to use some interesting ways to play around with the type. I'm going to do a few options. So I'm going to twirl down the text. Now the text comes with this great option of animating. I can animate the text in a few different ways just by clicking on here, but I also have my path options if I want to play around with the path. More options if I want to play those more options. Not going to worry about those right now. I'm just going to click on animate, and I'm going to animate the tracking. So let's just play around with this, see what we could do here. So the tracking type and tracking amount shows up. So tracking type before and after, I leave as is, that's totally fine. The tracking amount, so my CTI or my playback head is set at the very beginning of this timeline here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say it's fine the way it is. I'm going to click on the stopwatch, which is going to select my keyframe. And as I do that, if I undo that, it actually selects both at the same time. It's going to animate both, which is totally fine. It's saying that this is going to animate too. This is a part of it. And that happens, obviously, and this is great. We could play around with this too, but we're not going to. So at this particular point, this keyframe is remembering this information. All right, as I move it forward, let's say 2-second mark, I'm going to change that tracking amount. That's all I'm going to do is click. I'm just not going to hover over it and scrub. I could type in a specific amount if I just click on it. I'm just going to click on scrub and let it go that far. Let's just say, okay, good, that's it. I bring it back. I'm going to press the space bar to press play, and that's what it does. Now, obviously, if I want that to happen faster, I can move my keyframe in just by clicking on it and dragging it, and it happens much faster. Or I could drag it out and make it go even longer if I wanted to. And now it's going to go really, really slow. Now that's a little too much, so I'm going to bring it back. But once again, it's all in the eye of the beholder. The aesthetic that you're trying to go for, you do what you want to do. But this keyframe, no matter what you do, it's going to remember that information. It's going to remember the tracking amount at 59. I was like, okay, that's great. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move one step further. I'm going to actually click on add for the animator 1. I have options to look at the range selector. I'm not going to look at that just yet. Just animator 1 I'm going to look at, and I'm going to add another type of animation. I'm going to add in the blur effect. So with my blur at the CTI at the 0-second mark, my blur I'm going to keep as is. I want to add that, but I do want to keyframe that's going to remember that information. So I'm going to click on my stopwatch. There's my keyframe, and now I'm going to move it over to the last keyframe that I set up for my tracking amount. Now my blur, I'm going to make it blur right out. Okay, there it goes. It's going to blur. Now let's take a look at that animation, and it blurs. It's a kind of cool little effect there. Now there's a bit of an issue here where I could kind of still see it. I kind of just want it to disappear. Well, so what I could do, I can go to my opacity. I can click on my opacity here. I could even also animate a new opacity, but I can choose this opacity as well. But actually, let me add another opacity here. So I'm going to click on this opacity, and there's my opacity. So at this point, I'm going to click on maybe right about here and say the opacity as at 100. And then at this point, my opacity is going to go to, maybe I'll overshoot it a little bit and say it's going to be 0%. So now when I animate, it'll start to fade away, and now it's totally gone, right? So because if I left off that opacity, and brought it back, I might actually keep a little bit. No, it actually did a pretty good job. But all in all, now it's totally gone. If I didn't have the opacity on, the blur still stays a little bit. So now it fades out, totally gone. Pretty cool effect there. So now that I have this, I've figured this out, and just a nice little simple animation there. I'm going to do something else a little bit simple. Play around with our range selectors. Now, range selectors are pretty interesting. I'm just going to shut this one off. I've kind of created something interesting there. Our range selectors are something we could play around with too. So I'm going to type the same thing again. I'm going to just type in hello, my friend. Great. Right, I'm going to hold down Command, double click there, and align. Great. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with the range selectors. So same idea, but this time I'm going to click on the text, scroll it down. I'm going to click on Animate, and I'm going to click on Position. Okay, well, what can we do here? Let's first start off with our range selector. So Animator 1. I'm going to twirl it down, range selector, I'm going to twirl it down. What the range selector allows me to do, it allows me to control how the animation starts and ends with my start and end, and even animate the offset. So let me show you what that means. If I scrub the start, we're going to see a little bit of a tool show up that's going to show me where it starts. So there is actually where the start is going to happen, where it's going to start the animation. And if I click on my end is going to come in from the end, and I can control how many characters at a time will this animation use. Now I could also just click and drag here and do it from here as well, which will make this move as well. So here's my start. I could bring my start in. I could bring my end in. Now this is a little tight because the anchor point's there, so I'll just scrub it right here. There I go. And now I can just move that back and forth wherever I want that to be. We're going to see how this goes once I play around with the offset. Let me scrub the offset. So this is how the animation is going to work. It's going to go from here to there. It's going to scrub 2 characters at a time. Okay, well, what if I want a little bit more? Totally not a problem. I can bring this back and say, you know what, I'm going to want 4 characters at a time. I could zoom in, zoom out if I need to. And now I could do the offset, and now I see it does 4 characters at a time. That's pretty cool. So I could play around with the offset. I could actually animate the start. I could animate the end or animate the offset, whichever one I want to do, which I'm going to play around with a few. But first what I need to do, this position that I added, remember I wanted to animate and I added a position? Well, there's this new position down here. There's also the normal transform position. It's there, it's fine. That's my normal state where I left it at. So I'm going to animate this position, which is a part of the range selector of the animator of the text. So I need to kind of be somewhere in between once I start this animation. So let me first start by clicking on the offset. I'm going to click on the offset stopwatch. There it is right there. There's my keyframe. It's remembering all this information. I'm going to move it up a little bit, and I'm going to click on a new keyframe. Or I could actually just move the offset. And I'm going to see how the offset is moving. I want the offset to be right at the end. Now what happened was my end is not allowing me to do that. So I just need to move my end and make sure it's near the end. Oh, sorry, my start is being the issue. There it goes. So now my start is being pushed all the way there, which is good. I'm going to go back to my beginning and make sure that my range selectors, or my start and end, are also at the very end here, which it's not really happening. So let me move my offset, and it's bringing back my start and end all together. Great. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move it in halfway, and I'm noticing something. My end and start moved a little bit, so let me bring it back around here. So I see that's my start, but where's my end? I need to bring my end in a little bit. There's my end. Great. I'm going to do 2 characters at a time. So now that's just moving my offset. See how that's moving there? And both by the end should be cleared. So they should both the start and end indicator should be at the end of my animation, should be at the end, and at the start they should both be at the start, which they are. That's perfect. Now that comes a little too far, so let me move this offset a little bit more. But right before, there it goes, right there. That's where they start. That's where I want it to go. So this is going to be my animation. Now, nothing's really happening yet. That's fine. What I need to do is go to about midway, and I'm going to start playing with the position. Now watch what happens when I play with this position. I'm just going to click on the y-axis for now, and I'm just going to scrub. And look what happens. This starts to bring it down. Okay, that's interesting. Well, let me actually bring it up. That's fine too. And let's just see what more or less what this animation is going to do. It's going to start here. It's going to play around like that. Pretty cool. Let's actually play that. All right. So I've used the range selector to tell the animation to only animate a few things at a time. So that's the offset. That's what's happening. It starts here, it ends here, it uses this as the offset. So I animated the offset. Pretty cool. Now, and that's just the position animation. So it's animating the position. It starts here, goes up a little bit, comes down. Now, if I want to go further, I don't have to change any, add any keyframes to the position. I don't have to do anything there, make any animation. I just need to play around with it. That's it. I could scrub it really high and say I want to go that high, sure. And all the characters are going to follow suit. All right, so we could really play around and have some fun with this. I'm going to bring it back just a little bit, a little too much, because what I want to do is I want to add other animations to this. So I'm going to add more animations. So I'm going to click on Animator 1, this little add button, and I'm going to say, you know what, let's add a little bit of scale. All right, so the scale gets added automatically. Remember, I don't have to animate anything. This is the animation, the offset. The scale now gets added. And what I could do with the scale, I'm about midway. I'm going to up the scale. And maybe it gets that big when at its peak. So I'm going to go back and let's see how that works. So now the scale is in there too. It just got animated automatically along with all of this because this is what's happening. I'm saying the offset is going to do this. It's going to move it slowly across, and all those things are going to happen to those letters. All right, great. Now let's add one more. I'm going to add, and let's add a opacity. Okay. So now with the opacity, same thing. I don't have to add any keyframes, don't have to click on the stopwatch. It's going to add it automatically. It's going to start at 100% because that's where my opacity is, 100%. Great. So I'm going to bring it down to 0%. So here's what happens. That's it. It's kind of going to fly in, fly out, bringing it down to that 0% right there. Okay. So pretty cool. I could also add in a rotation. Let's just throw it in for fun. Rotation, I'm going to say let's rotate it one full 360 degrees. That's all I have to do. And now it's going to rotate it at 360 degrees. Now this is a little interesting. It's a lot happening right now. So, you know, there's maybe a particular reason why you're doing this for an animation, but I just want to show you all the different things you can kind of do with this and have some fun playing around with that. Now there is a few other attributes that I can change that can make this a little bit more interesting. So let me go and click down twirl down the advanced option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to play this. I'm going to bring in this selector here and just say, you know what, play this animation over and over and over again. And as I change it, you're going to see some things happen. Okay, number one, let's play it. Let's see what happens. It's just going to play it over and over. It's going to get to this point and it's going to loop back and play over. So let me change my based on characters to based on words, because I have 3 words, which is characters as well. Now that's kind of odd, but that's what it's doing. Now it's based on just the words. I could fix up my animation. I could do whatever I want, but I'm going to go back to character for now. The mode, let's actually do a subtraction. Let's see what happens if I do subtraction. Okay, it kind of does the opposite. It did the opacity was 0, it brought it down to 100, but now the words are doing the opposite thing. They're coming in and coming out as opposed to staying where they should. Okay, let's just go back to add. Awesome. The amount I'm going to leave alone, but the smoothness of the animation I can bring right down. It's going to be very choppy, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to bring up that smoothness just a little bit. Let's see what it does. Okay, it has a little different effect to it. The ease high and the ease low, I've played around with. I'm not happy with some of the things it does, but you can play around with that a little bit more. Oh, and I can even randomize the order of where those letters come into play. All right, that's kind of interesting too. It might come in handy if you want to play around. So I'm going to stop that. Now, those are kind of the full out, you can really go crazy with this. Let me play around with this a little bit easier. So I'm going to do another set of type here. I'm going to type in the same thing. All right. Going to center that. Command, double click on there. Anchor point is set. Align, and it's going to be right in the middle of my composition. Beautiful. So same thing, twirl down. My animate, I'm going to animate. And this time I'm going to animate just position. Let's play around and see what this does. I'm going to click down, twirl down my animator 1. And twirl down my range selector. This time I'm going to animate the start, not the offset. I'm going to animate the start. The start is just going to kind of go through all the way to the end. Very simple, all the way to the end. Okay, there we go. I'm going to move my CTI. I'm going to click on my start to be at 0. Stopwatch is set, it remembers 0%, and I'm going to bring it to about the 2-second mark, and I'm going to bring it to 100%. Okay, so what happened was mainly that start indicator is going to go from start to finish. Now I don't have to worry about end, I don't have to worry about offset. These are options I can play around with, but I'm just going to show you what happens if we just play with start. I'm going to change the position. I'm going to go about halfway, as I like to do, because it actually shows you what's going to happen. And I'm going to bring up the actually, I'm going to bring down so I could actually bring it all the way up. There we go. So about at the beginning, what's happening is like it's actually off the composition. That's where I want it to be, because what I want to happen is it's just going to come in like this. It's just going to drop in like that. That's pretty cool. We're happy with that. It's like, you know what? I actually don't want it to drop in from the top. I want it to drop in from the bottom. Not a problem. We don't have to do any extra animation. This is animating it for us. I just got to say, you know what? How about you start it from the bottom? Okay, cool. And come up. Now it's coming up. That's great. So you know what? Maybe I don't like that either. So I'm going to go midway so I can see what's going on. I'm going to set this back to 0. And now you say, you know what? I'm going to work on the x-axis and I'm going to bring it over here. Okay. So let's see what this does. If I bring it all the way over here, now they're just going to slide in from the left. Now that's pretty fast. So let me slow it down by dragging over the keyframe. Now it slides in nicely. Pretty good. If I add a motion blur to that, which I believe I can, it should kind of smooth that out even more. So see how you see that motion blur really helping out there, which is really nice. I could obviously even easy ease this. I'm just going to select the keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, and let's see if that changes a nice slow, fast, slow. Well, the last one definitely eased in quite nicely, so we could definitely play around with that too if we ever wanted to. Really fine tune it with the graph editor, and that's kind of how we do a start. Now, once again, if I wanted to, I can add in more animation. So let's add in, let's add in scale. Okay, so there's my scale. This is where it is right now. So I'm about midway. And I'm going to say, you know, let's add that scale a little bit bigger and let's see what happens. And it's linked, so it's all going to be proportional. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I can't really tell too well, but it does go. So let me make it even bigger so it's really noticeable. Okay, let's see if that helps at all. Nah, it's tough because where it's coming from, the scale is actually here and then shrinking down. So let's do the opposite. Let's change the position. I'm going to change the position back to coming in from the top. So let's set this back to 0. And now I'm going to make my position up here. There we go. So now when it comes in, I'll be able to tell that, there we go. It gets bigger, then it goes smaller. Let's even go even more. Let's really make that scale even bigger. Great. Now we'll probably be able to tell a little bit more. Yeah. Great. Very good. Okay, so now that's kind of one I wanted to show you. Here's another one I want to show. Again, I'm just going to duplicate this and I'm just going to play around a little bit differently. So I'm just going to Command D or Control D on a PC, twirl it down, but this time with my text and all this going on, I'm actually going to remove my position and scale. I'm just going to delete those. The range selector is still there, my animation is still there, but nothing's really happening. So I'm going to add in an opacity, and let's play around with opacity. Okay, so right now the opacity is obviously set to 100, but my animated opacity, which is a part of my range selector, is set to 0. So let's go, or sorry, set to 100. Let's go to 0, and let's see what happens here. Just slowly comes in nice and easy. Now if I once again change the advanced mode and change it to words, one word at a time. All right, and I could change up the frequency, so how fast that comes in or how slow it comes in. All right, really nice effect. And that's all I did was type in a word, added an opacity, made my start, let me bring that down, made my start from 0 to 100%, played around with the opacity. Very, very simple on how to do that. Once again, let's go back to the advanced and see if we can, we'll keep the words on for now. The smoothness, if I want to change up the smoothness for whatever reason, I don't want it to be that smooth, maybe it'll be a little more choppy. It can be that choppy. I brought the smoothness down, so now it's just going to come in just flat like that, which is totally fine. I could randomize the order, which like I said, I don't really like to do, but potentially you might have a reason to do that. Okay. So there is some play here that we can do, but for the most part, this is kind of what a range selector can do for us. We can play around. Let me actually do the end. I'll do the opposite here. I'm going to duplicate this again, Command D, and this time instead of animating the the start, I'm going to animate the end. So I'm going to kill those, click on the end. Here's my first keyframe. I'm going to move it over here, and then I'm going to animate the end to 100 at the end. So it's just going to do the opposite. Oh, let me fix that advanced. Let me make it characters, and let me work on that. There we go. So now it's just going to start from the end. That's all it really does. So what the animation is saying, that what the range selector we're doing is saying, go this way, end to the beginning, as opposed to if I worked with the start, I can go start to the end, okay? And then the offset, that's all the offset does, is just play with the amount of characters I want it to work with at one time. So let me do that version too. Command D one more time. Okay, I have my animator 1, range selector. I have my opacity set at 0%, so it goes start at 0. That's great. And now what I can do, I'm going to kill all my keyframes in the end, and now I'm just going to create the offset. All right. So let's see what the offset does. I might have to play around with the start and end first, but let's just see what it does. I'm going to make my offset and bring it in. No, I don't really need to play with that, but I can if I wanted to. It kind of does the same thing with start, but what I can do is actually play with my start and end to say I want certain characters to show up and other ones to show up at a different time. So that is my end. I'm going to bring this back over here a little bit so I can see both. There we go. Now my offset, I'm going to bring this in. So say I want a few characters at one time. So my end, I'm going to bring in, so let's just do 2 characters at a time. But now I got to bring my offset back a little bit more. Let me kill that one too. I'm going to bring my offset back a little bit more because it's just not there. There we go. There's my offset. They're both the start and end indicators are both at the beginning. And let's see if at the end they both come together at the end. Yes, they do. Even more so. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, that's it. So now it kind of does it in a certain way, which I don't love it, but there is an option to actually change the range to show more characters at once as opposed to one at a time, and there's a little bit of play there. So I hope this helped you understand range selectors and how you could play with them to bring type in an interesting way and play around with it there. Okay, I want to try playing around with an effect and still have it kind of be kinetic typography. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a new type. Once again, same thing I'm going to type in. But this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to set it on a black background just to show you maybe this effect in a slightly better way. So I'm going to make the type white just by going to my character panel, play around with that. And what I'll do is I will just add a layer, a solid layer, new solid layer. And I'm just going to make it black. It's going to be make the comp size black, simple. There we go. And I have that. What I'm going to do on my layer panel, I'm going to bring it underneath my type. And there I go. Beautiful. What I love to do obviously with the type, I'm going to lock my solid layer first, just so I don't play with it. It's just there for the purpose of being a background. I'm going to hold Command, double click on my anchor tool, and I'm going to just align. This time I'm going to use an effect. I'm going to play around with this a little bit and see what kind of cool effect I can get. I'm going to go to my effects and presets. I'm going to type in Radial and see where it comes up. What I'm looking for is CC Radial Fast Blur. Now with this type selected, I'm actually just going to click and drag and bring it on there. I could have also just double clicked it, and that's fine. Now let's play around here. The center, that is at the center. Perfect. So really what I'm going to play around with is amount, and I am going to move the center around, okay? So as of right now, if I start at the beginning, I want my CTI to be, and I want the blur to be 0, so no blur whatsoever, which is great. Okay, so I'm going to drop this down, twirl it down, go to my effects. It doesn't really matter, but I just want to see where the keyframes are at. There I go. So I'm going to click on my stopwatch. There shows my keyframe. I'm going to move this over just a little bit, and I'm going to zoom. I'm going to change the amount, sorry, not the zoom. I'm going to change the amount to a little bit as it really starts to, so we could have some fun with that right there. That looks pretty cool. The standard zoom, maybe we could play around. Let's see what else that does. If that does something else. Brighter, darkest. Okay, that's not great. Standard looks pretty good. I'm fine with that. Okay, so what I could do now, it's going to zoom out. And now I could actually change some keyframes and move the center around. So here it is. I've kind of blasted it out there. And now I'm going to change where it goes. So I'm going to click on my center stopwatch. And now I'm going to actually move the center just by clicking on these. And you're going to see what's going to start happening with the actual radial, the radial blur. I'm going to scrub my x-axis and kind of play around of where I want it to go. And right now I'm moving. You can see the anchor point, that other anchor point, that center anchor point of my radial fastbur is going to the end. It's moving. I'm moving it to the end. All right, great. So there is, we can go right there, say roughly. There's a new anchor point set. This center part, it's right there. So it's going to start from the center. Then it's going to go here. Let's add another one. Then I'm going to create another, once I start moving this, another anchor point is going to appear, and I'm just going to drag it this way. I'm going to hold down shift to make it go a little bit faster, and I want it to end up over here. Great. So let's look at that animation really quickly. Now, if I wanted to go a little bit slower, obviously I could just spread out the keyframes, but that's actually not too bad. And now I'm going to bring it back to the center one more time, and I'm going to kind of bring it back into play. So I'm just going to bring this back to the center. Right about there. I'm just scrubbing it. There I go, back to the center. And now what I want to happen here is it just to come back to normal. Pretty cool effect. Okay, so I'm going to move this. And at this point, I'm going to now change the amount again. So I'm going to make another keyframe here. So at this point, the amount will be still at 100% blur. And I'm just going to move it back maybe another second, and I'm going to bring it back to 0%. All right, that's it. So I start off with nothing, or with exactly nothing happening, with exactly what I want to see, and I end with exactly what I want to see. Okay, so let's try that out. So it moves from there, comes back this way, goes back to the center, and then it kind of fades back in, which is kind of cool. If I wanted to, I could animate this and actually loop it. So let's see what looping does here. So I'm going to hold down Option and click on my stopwatch, and I'm going to loop out. So I'm just going to press enter from here, because this is already an expression we need. I'm just going to type in the word loop, and I want to loop out. So I'm double click on that, and let's see what happens. I'm going to bring this all the way so I see the full animation. Let's see what actually loops here. And let's see if this animation constantly loops. Ah, that part constantly loops. Okay, not a problem. It should come back perfect. So what I'm also going to loop as well is I'm going to loop this. Hold down Option, click on the stopwatch, and my expression panel shows up. So right here in the timeline, I'm just going to type in loop, double click, perfect. I'm going to bring this back, and let's see how this goes. Let's see if everything loops. So at this point, realistically, it should stop. So let's see if it loops. Yep, the whole thing continues to loop over and over and over again. So it's a pretty cool expression we can use to just keep things looping until the end of the duration of the actual file I have here. But this works out pretty cool, and I thought that was a pretty nice little addition to this. So there's another way we could play with kinetic typography, the motion of type, but actually use an effect we can use that actually creates something pretty interesting as well, and a little in your face, but pretty interesting nonetheless.